This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com. Of course, follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by VFX Supervisor James MacLachlan, who recently finished Ted Lasso Season 3. Welcome to the show, James.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Cheers.
I guess my first question is, how did you get involved with Ted Lasso?
It was a long time ago, at the beginning of Season 2, in between Seasons 1 and 2. A pandemic hit the world. I don't know if you remember it. And I got a phone call from an agent called Harriet Donington, who represents VFX Supervisors here in the UK. And they were after somebody to cover Season 2. And fortunately enough, it was up the road from my house, not too far. And because of everything being shut down, I was able to jump on a bicycle and supervise visual effects up the road. So through Harriet, I met everybody, met the production heads, met a bunch of people on that side, and also we had Barnstorm VFX were already involved. They'd done Season 1, the football shoots, so they wanted to know that I was somebody who could cover it as well. So between production and Kip Kroger and Corey and Lawson at Barnstorm, they sort of gave me the green light, and off we went. Yeah.
How did COVID change your guys' approach to the VFX? Like, did it have to change a lot of things, or did things stay the same? What happened?
There were, as most of us knew, we were all wearing masks and we were all restricted with how long we could be around one another. I would say this, our COVID department were exceptional on Ted Lasso. I mean, they were headed up by great people. They really ran a tight ship. And so what that does is you're very used to being on people's shoulders on a set and running around chatting to, 100 people in a day as a VFX supervisor. We have to chat to everybody from lighting to DOP to director to grips to, wardrobe if there's things that pop up. So in a way, it restricted the sort of personal, quick communication. But so long as we were prepared and we knew what we were shooting and we were ahead of time, we were sort of all right. Yeah, we were okay. And all standing around wearing wristbands, being tested every single morning. And occasionally on off days, if I wasn't, it was non-consecutive days for me on Season 2. So I'd have to jump on my bicycle and ride to wherever they were shooting the day before and get myself tested and then ride back. It was easy to jump on a bike in London, as you may or may not know. So I was doing that, which was quite nice. And then the following day we'd turn up and everybody was really respectful of one another, which was amazing. Hanging out on the set, it's a lot like the show. The people we had, the cast, the crew, all the members of it were amazing to be around and super respectful of all of the processes of the COVID people. And I don't think we shut down for one day due to COVID. We just didn't, whereas a lot of other productions did. So it's testament to their abilities and their rules and processes that they had in place, because we were still shooting inside tight locations and stuff. So yeah, it was pretty amazing of them.
I think what attracted me to color correction was the fact that we were like the next stage of cinematography, and the creative side was huge, trying to understand what was wrong with an image, how to balance it, trying to understand how to let the tools do what you want them to do. Where else can the technology go? What else can we do? I'm very interested in trying to mold the image and create the best look possible, and whatever tools are out there, you want to try and latch onto them. I'm Eric Whipp, and this is my course on color correction.
Did it add any, did it add any VFX that you guys had to do? Because I think about some productions, it was like, okay, well, we can't shoot in certain locations, so we had to add, set extensions or build new things, or we have to keep these actors separate, so we had to alter it afterwards.
No, we were all right on that front. The only thing that did happen was we obviously shoot with a lot of SAs every now and then, supporting actors who are background cast members. And we obviously, as VFX, like to blur that line between what's happening in camera in the foreground with the actors and where the VFX begin. And we blur that line by putting as many SAs into seats as we can, in the stands, in the, you know, street scenes, and the what have you. And there was a couple of occasions where we turned up at the dugout set, which is completely independent of the football sets and all that. And unfortunately, a third of them had caught COVID. So instead of us having 150 people, we had slightly less than 100 due to COVID. So they got turned around, you know, that morning, because they all got tested every morning. So we did have to add in a few extra caveats with how we were going to move the people around to make sure they were filling the frame as best we could with just 100 rather than 150. And that sounds a bit like a woe is me situation. Oh, you've only got 100. But when you've got stadium seats where there are thousands of seats empty, it really does add up quickly. So you'd be surprised how few 100 people is when you're actually, you know, shooting in a stadium or on a set that requires a lot of extras. Yeah.
And in this case, you're saying you're like plating them, so you're like moving them to another section, having them do something different. So
we didn't technically plate them as such. What we would do is we always had two cameras, and they were usually pointing, you know, at the stars in the foreground. So that means when you've got crossed cameras, you've got two individual backgrounds. So you would split the SAs between those two backgrounds as best we could. But no, we didn't plate any seats. What we did, or very, 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 very little, we would fill the camera gate for each of those cameras as best we could between the actors backwards. So you would get this weird slewed shape, you know, like a rhombus away from camera of seats that were filled. And knowing full well we would put more crowd behind that, but we were very for production timelines. I mean, plating, I mean, Man City is 53,000 seats, so yeah, we're never going to plate that. But also for emotive reasons. So we would, I can address that in a second, but we would fill the midground with real people, knowing the background would basically be filled out with real people being shot with real cameras and in volume stages at Metastage. And they would be then filled in with real performances, real emotions. So it was really important that we had that flexibility, and that production were able to move their cameras around quickly. And we had this lovely little dance going with once the cameras settled in, as soon as the DOP was happy with an angle, we would get the ADs would get in. The crowd ADs were amazing. Gabe and his team and everybody would shuffle people around in the seats and move them around really quickly to fill the new gate, the camera gate. And then we get rolling, knowing each time that we would then fill in the rest of the seats behind.
Interesting. Now, what changes did you have to make from season 2 to season 3?
Well, we were fortunate. The changes we had to make were due to the popularity of the show. It was very fortunate. You know, each time the show did well, Ted Lasso won more Emmys and was a very popular show that was, I think the pandemic hit at the right time for Lasso, and Lasso hit at the right time for the pandemic, and everybody was looking for that kind of show to arrive. And due to that popularity, you know, season 2, you turn it up to 11, and then season 3 comes along and you're like, okay, we need to go bigger again. Because so many people had expectations of us from the previous seasons and expected more from the show. And also, obviously, Jason and Brendan and Bill and the teams of writers who were exceptional were writing this show with greater depth, longer episode lengths. So we knew it was just a case of making sure that we were buttoned down with what we were doing and how we were looking at these games as emotive pieces that were helping drive the story forward. And I don't know if you watched any sports during the pandemic, but here in the UK, we had Premier League football matches where there was no crowds. Yeah. And it was a really odd experience. You could hear all the players yelling at each other. There was no crowd noise. They tried fake crowd noise. It didn't quite work. And I think that was really good indicator as to what would have happened with Lasso without really tailoring the crowds and the backgrounds to create some of the atmosphere for all of these games and make sure that they drive the emotion of what's happening in the foreground with the actors and the football. So we had to make sure that all of the crowds were reacting properly. So very early in the show, in season 2, Lawson put together a video. Lawson at Barnstorm put together an 8-minute video of emotions, and it went from high to low to excited to biting your nails to, and that video drove all of our crowd sprites that we shot and our volume captures at the meta stage. So we had this 8-minute video, which we managed for season 3 to trim down to 6 minutes. But it was really great video. It was slightly annoying hearing it, 150 times in a day or whatever it was. It was on loop all day. But it had, season 3 had Bill doing the video, and he would say, okay, now the game is going, you're crazy and you're going to win. And oh, you've missed the goal, and sit down on, oh, you're disappointed. And so we had all of these emotive beats through this. And it was like a choreographed dance. It was really nice to watch because we shot all of the people as individuals. So we had, I think 2 days we shot crowd people who came in as individuals. We lined them up in almost like a criminal lineup, as it were, and we had them all slightly separated. And there was about, I think we shot 7 at the time. We put them in their, Man City garb or their Richmond. And then they came in, and one by one, the groups cycled through, and they would watch this video. They would watch Bill doing all of the emotions before they got on the stage. But then what we'd do is we'd only play them the audio when they were actually performing. So that way they wouldn't mimic Bill every time. Yeah. They would add their own flavor to it, which is quite, it was a bit of an undertaking, but actually it gave us a hell of a lot of flexibility once we got to edit and we knew what the crowds were having to do at specific emotive beats within shots. Sometimes shots would change mid-shot. They'd have to sit down or grab their head or be really disappointed. And so all of that emotion was able to be driven after we'd shot everything, right at the end. And it really helped the scenes stitch together with emotively with what was happening in the foreground, if the team was doing well or not doing well. So we were very fortunate on that front that we put a fair amount of planning into it, but it really pulled off.
What would you say are some of the challenges from season 3 that you had to overcome?
I think the one thing that we extended this time was metastage. So the metastage capture was the volume captured people. So they're real people, real performances, but they're captured as a volume. And the reasoning behind that was we didn't want to restrict production's camera positions. So for most of the shots, we had a lot of, we used the crowd sprites that I just talked about, which we shot with just a traditional camera in front of the green screen. But then occasionally we'd have shots where they were really close to the crowd, where we might have been at Manchester City's dugout filming Ted or Pep, and they were near the crowd, but we only had a few in those sort of little areas. So we needed the extra detail, and we needed a camera angle that was maybe slightly off from a traditional football camera angle. So therefore the crowd wasn't perfectly flat on. So we had to have the ability to relight these crowd based on where the sun was and based on the angle they were relative to camera. So I think that extension was fairly significant. And the other one was the breadth and depth that we were able to go to reconstructing the stadiums because of getting Visual Skies on board. Visual Skies were our LiDAR and photogrammetry company who really helped us out. They were an amazing vendor. They would go up and they went up to Man City, and I think they spent 2 days in that stadium scanning the entire place. I mean, these are big places, and they got it to sort of nut bolt level. Now, we recreated the stadium in CGI because we needed, where the people were, how they cast shadows, how many seats there were, all that sort of stuff, one crowd member per seat. But the guys up there did, when they were up there, sent drones into the air and also were able to capture photogrammetry for us. So we were able to map in those little extra eccentricities that you get in some of these stadiums. They're not, even though City's stadium is quite a new one, it's got these weird little things that happen that you don't see, you know, little bars and details that aren't necessarily there when you're just casually watching a match. Little things like the fall off from the pitch, you know, it sits a bit lower than some of the others. So the pitch level down to where the first members watching the game are is quite pronounced. So if you're right at the front row, your head is almost at grass level. So there's all these little things. So that level of detail that Visual Skies gave us and the meta stage stuff really, really helped us.
Now you've sort of mentioned a couple of the companies, but like a lot of times when I look, you know, when you look at the credits in a VFX project, there's like tons of companies, tons of people. As a supervisor, how do you maintain or sort of keep track of everything going over all these different companies to make sure that there's a consistency between the different elements coming in?
The Barnstorm did such a great job in season 1 and in season 2. They covered all of the football.
Oh wow!
So if you saw Premier League football being played, they were covering it. So all the stadiums, all the crowds. And then we had a load of other visual effects shots. We had blue screen studios for KJPR, for Rebecca's office, for Higgins's office. We had to plate in lambs. We had to do a bunch of cleanup and usual stuff. And that was handled a lot by DFT and Ingenuity. And then we had a few scenes that we felt we could just break out and give to Untold Studios. So it was kind of, initially it was location based in a way, you know, like one film would cover one location, and that worked out quite well for us. And the teams were all brilliant. They were all sending back amazing shots and obviously communication. So it was just a case of near constant, you know, checking of what people were getting up to, progress levels, all that sort of side of things. And Caitlin Hollenbeck and Brooke over in LA were covering the meat of that at the beginning, and then it was all hands on deck as we got deeper into the process, because obviously the scale elevated. Yeah.
So is there a particular scene that you're really proud of from season 3 that you know, might have been difficult to execute, but you're really proud of the outcome?
I think it's the Man City, the level of detail that was brought into the stadium and the build and the crowds and the emotive beats. The fact that we were able to shoot up there with an empty stadium, some shots, shoot on an empty Hazen-Yetting football field, because obviously we weren't allowed to touch their pitch. We were never on Man City's pitch. If you put a toe on their pitch, there'll be a groundsman who will come out and probably, he'll start with strong words and he'll probably end with physical violence if you move over that white line. So we had multiple shoot locations all being put into one, you know, once we shot the crowds in the meta stage in LA, and once we shot them here in London as sprites, and putting all of those together. There's the opening scene where it comes up through the stadium and they're singing Blue Moon, and I think there's 200 and about, well, once we took out a few stewards and photographers and stuff like that, and what we call corporate box SAs, I think we were down to about 200 people, and that shot pans around a good 3/4 of the stadium, or half of the stadium in the end of the edit. Yeah. So the fact that we were able to pull that off and get them singing the song and doing the actions, and then obviously a lot of the football footage through those scenes were amazing fun to be part of, because we had at Hazen-Yetting, where we shot all of the football action. The club were amazing. They were really supportive. Their groundsman was awesome. He would always have time for us. He'd be, you know, helping us out. And so we'd get on there, and we had typical broadcast camera positions. So we had low A and B cameras. We had goal line cameras, so they were in the goals. We had a gantry camera set up, which was up nice and high. And so on top of that, which I think really adds to the show, is there was that sort of traditional broadcast, but then we had Ronins and handheld and head cams running around this pitch and capturing as much of it as Pedro, the second unit director, was loving, you know, capturing all of this footage. We knew at some point we were going to have to put it all together cohesively in the edit. So we got quite detailed with our myself and the script supervisor drawing diagrams of where the cameras were, where the action was happening, what was happening, when, why, how, the sun, where, you know, all of these things. And stitching all of that together was quite a task. And then knowing as late as we could, because the editors, AJ and Melissa, would choose as late as they could to, you know, settle in on their edit, rightly so. We would then feed in the emotive beats of what the crowd was doing. So once the guys at Barnstorm VFX and Bill and the team over there were working on the shots, they were able to dial in the emotions. Literally in Nuke, they would say, okay, at this frame, the crowds of people are going to be excited and ecstatic. And then 3 shots later, they'll drop down to, you know, tired or exhausted or anxious or sitting, clapping, or so there was, it worked really well weaving all of that together. It was quite an undertaking by a load of uber talented people who I was just fortunate enough to be hanging around.
So I have 2 more questions for you. I guess my first one is, who's your go-to football team then?
My go-to football team is Newcastle United FC.
All right.
So they're I'm a Kiwi. I'm from New Zealand, but in the mid-90s, my uncle who lived in London, he sent me a Newcastle kit, and that was that. That was me. So we've had some lean years, but now we're doing all right. It's been, you know, it's a weird one, the Premier League. Money helps, and we're quite fortunate. So it'll be interesting to see how the team goes. I think, I think it'll be interesting to see. There's a lot of fun. The Premier League's a load of fun to watch. I've always been a football player. I was that one kid in New Zealand who wasn't playing rugby. So it's lovely to live here now in London and see it fairly constantly.
And see it live.
And see it live.
In person. Now, my last question for you is, what would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
Film or TV? So I've got a couple of young kids, so my access to a television is limited. But I do really enjoy Bluey, which is this Australian. Yeah, so
good.
It came along at the right stage. When you've got young kids, there's loads of options out there, and some of them are less attractive than others, but Bluey is just amazing. I mean, it's so we were fortunate enough. We lived in Brisbane a number of years ago, my partner and I, and she and I really got into the humor there. You know, we've got a lot of friends and family there, and having left, it's quite nice watching the show because you can actually spot some of the locations and things that they're doing there as well. So it's quite nice, and obviously kids love it.
A lot of the slang is starting to pick up in North America.
Nice.
Which is interesting. Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
Oh, no worries at all. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. It's lovely to chat.
And that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com, or of course, follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Merkel. Thanks for watching. This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs.